In this video, we're going to be replacing the original fuel filter in a 2004 Mercury Marauder. The reason I'm replacing my fuel filter isn't because the car is surging, but rather as preventative maintenance. The one underneath looks completely original, which means it's at least 17 years old. The problem with this is, even though my car has no drivability issues, that fuel pump is having to work extra hard to push fuel through that clogged filter that's in the car right now, and that can wear out the fuel pump, which is a lot harder to change than a simple fuel filter. So you're going to want to do this as preventative maintenance. If it looks rusty, you should probably change it. We're going to be doing this repair with basic hand tools. You're going to need a jack stand, Motorcraft fuel filter, abbreviated number FG986B. Here's the elongated number. And as for tools, you're going to need a standard size flathead and a really small flathead. As you can see, this is my thumb on the ground. This one you're going to be using to take off the clips to the fuel filter, which are very brittle, so it's important you get a really small flathead. It's worth mentioning that when you disconnect your fuel filter on the car, all the gas that's inside it is going to leak onto the ground. So you're going to want to make sure you have a small bucket right here to catch all the fuel that's inside this filter. The whole gas tank isn't going to drain, don't worry about that. The first step of this repair applies to air ride cars only. You're going to want to pop the trunk and make sure that you flip your air ride switch off by pressing this button on the left side of the trunk. After you did that, go onto the passenger side of the vehicle. Right below this rear door right here is where the fuel filter is. You're going to want to place your jack somewhere along the frame right about here. As you can see, right underneath the passenger side floor pan in the rear. The jack is right there. Relative position. Rear wheel. Place a stand right here where the frame's all wide, so it's not in your way when you're changing the filter. Then you can let the jack down so the weight is all on the stand right here. Once the vehicle is sitting on the stand, relocate your jack right next to it and place it so that it's just barely on the frame. This way, if that stand fails, you have something to save you. And remember, this is all done with the vehicle's suspension unloaded. The rear tire should either barely or not be off the ground, but there should be a huge gap in the fender to make sure you have enough working room under here. These cars have a fuel pump shut-off switch. The reason this is there is because when these things would get nailed in the back, the fuel pump would pump fuel all over the ground and cause the whole car to burn up in flames. It's going to be really useful in doing this fuel filter because you actually won't even have any fuel drip out, or a very small fuel drip out, if you do this quick trick. To trigger this shut-off switch manually, you're going to want to do as shown. This button right here will pop up if you did it correctly. You can't really tell, but on your car you will. It's really far down. Here we go. As you can see, the button came out, the fuel shut-off switch is enabled. After you hit the switch, turn your key to the on position. Make sure you don't hear the fuel pump run. Try to start the vehicle. As demonstrated, it won't start. That means the switch is disconnected. When you're under the car, you should have something that looks like this. This rubber boot right here, you're just going to want to grab it and pull it like that until it's out of the way of this clip right here. With the rubber boot out of the way, we can see how this clip works. If you look on this side, you can see the pins at the back of it, and over here you can only see the front. Now you're going to want to take your really small flathead screwdriver and very lightly, there's going to be ears on this when you do it yourself, pry up on the ears on each side and work the clip out this way. Once you got the first clip off, you're going to want to start attacking the rearward clip. Now this one is basically facing the opposite way of this one. So you have to push in these guys right here, these little white things, until it's out. The way I'm doing it is I'm pushing on the one that was loose and then grabbing it with my finger on the other side and then pushing this one out and just rocking back and forth until it's ready to come out. When you have both clips out, now you can start removing the hose clamp with your flathead screwdriver. Once you disconnect the hose clamp completely, you can grab the filter and get it out of the bracket. Just push it up and then bring it over. For all of these cars, the rearward line is not a quick disconnect, so I recommend disconnecting that one first to drain the fuel inside the filter. Here's how much gas that came out of the filter. As you can see, it's just on the bottom, and wow, am I glad I did that filter. Wow. With the back connector removed and the filter drained, you can remove this front connector. This is the reason that this tutorial is only from 98 to 05, because midway through the 05 model year, they changed this to a quick disconnect, which is the same principle, but you gotta use a special tool to get it off. This one, all you're gonna do is push the connector forward and then pull it off. I hope to God your fuel filter isn't 17 years old, because that was a complete pain to get that last line off. But it's off now, so we can continue. Install is the opposite of removal. I would start with this end first and then do the back one last, just because this one's a little more stubborn. Now, make sure you get the correct direction. As you can see, I'm stupid. This is the correct direction. You want the rim to be facing this way. There should be a fuel flow arrow, like that, facing towards the front of the car. Alright, so that ended up going a lot worse than I thought it would have. What ended up happening was, if you paid attention, there was a little black grommet on the snout of the old filter when I pulled it out. That was part of this connector right here. And what happened was, the guts of that connector pulled out with the old filter, which made me need to reassemble this connector. But the problem is, that's next to impossible. But I finally got it done. I've never ever seen this before. None of you guys should have to do that part. It should just be take out, place in. And now that that's out the way, all you're going to do is take your plastic connectors right here. If you broke them, take your new ones and just put them right back in. If they go in, that means the fuel filter's assembled correctly. If they don't go in, that means you have to push the connectors on more. So yeah. After you place both connections back on the filter and got the clips in, go ahead and tighten the hose clamp right there. And then you're done, really. I mean, last thing to do is get the vehicle back on the ground. Once you're sure everything's buttoned up underneath the car, you can go back into the trunk and press the button, as you heard it click, to the fuel inertia switch, so your fuel pump can prime again. With the inertia switch on, now you gotta make sure that you do this step. It's really important. Have a second person come out with you, keep the car jacked up, and have them look at the fuel filter and make sure it's not leaking. You're gonna wanna get into the car and cycle the key to on 3 or 4 times, and they have to make sure that there's not a drop coming out of this filter. The car is going to be making some pretty cringeworthy noises as you do this, because the fuel pump's running dry, but it'll clear up, and that's how you know the fuel system's primed. Just give it a listen real quick when I do it. As demonstrated, it's pretty bad, but keep doing it. And it's becoming more normal. Here. Normal. Perfect. That means your fuel system is fully primed, and you can go ahead and start the car as long as you know you have no leaks. With the vehicle running, go outside, look at the fuel filter, and make sure this thing ain't leaking. Now you can jack the car up and get the weight off the stand, pull out the jack, and let the car back on the ground. This step applies to people with air ride only. Go into your trunk, find the air ride switch, and flip it back on so your suspension will work normally again. Make sure you do this after you put the car back on the ground. And that's it, the guide to a fuel filter on a Panther platform from 98 to 2005. I hope you guys have an easier time than I did, but to be honest, for a majority of you, this should take maybe 5-10 minutes. Next time something breaks on this car, I'll be back with another video.